Perhaps some of you have heard this old story about a guy who was standing alone, leaning over a fence, enjoying a beautiful view from the top of the Grand Canyon when suddenly the fence gave way and seconds later he was plunging down into the abyss. Halfway to the bottom, the desperate thrashing of his arms helped him catch and clutch the branch of a scrubby tree that was growing out from the canyon wall. Grasping and gasping, he looked both up and down. There was no way he could climb up that sheer cliff, even if he could swing his body toward the wall. But below yawned the chasm, unbroken by any other nearby tree. To fall would be to die. He hung there, out of sight, knowing the wind would scatter his voice no matter how loudly he shouted to any possible humans at the top of the canyon. So he cried out to the heavens, "God, help me." But hearing his own trembling voice, he wailed again louder, "Please, God, help me." And to his amazement, he heard an answer. The voice said, "Let go. Let go." Looking down again, the man saw the depth of the canyon and the huge boulders waiting far below, and he knew again if he let go, he would surely die. He yelled back, "But God, you don't understand. I'm too far up." "Let go," the voice repeated, and silence filled the canyon. Then, in a weak, terrified voice, the man called out, "Is there anyone else up there?" Trust. Our lives depend on our ability to trust in both extreme and mundane situations. Deciding who and what we can trust is a lifelong process. Who do you trust? And do they trust you back? How do we build trust into a wide variety of relationships and connections so that we can let go of control now and then and know that someone's got us? Building trust is inherently mutual. It's not one-sided. So how do we do it? Grounded theory researcher Brené Brown develops helpful theories based on people's lived experiences. She gathers thousands of examples from interviews with people about things like trust. Then she organizes the data and proposes a theory. She breaks it down into something we can work with in our own lives. Last Sunday, Reverend Kimberly worked with our children using Brené Brown's theory of trust. To understand how this works, you need to know about the marble jar. Anybody know about the marble jar? Maybe you've heard about it. Maybe you've listened to the TED Talk. I'll give you a brief version. Brené Brown, in her TED Talk, describes the day that her daughter came home from 3rd grade and just dissolved into tears. And what happened was that her daughter had shared something with 2 friends during recess, and then they later told everybody in the class. So when she got back from recess, everyone was laughing and making fun of her. The teacher interrupted by telling the class they were going to get some marbles taken out of the marble jar for choosing to act in this hurtful way. See, in that classroom, there was a jar, and there were some marbles, and marbles were put into the jar when children acted in ways that positively built up their relationships, and marbles were taken out of the jar when the children's actions damaged those relationships. And you know why they were doing it, right? To build these social and emotional skills and build community, but the incentive was to fill the jar so the whole class would get a reward once the jar was full. Well, after hearing her daughter's story of what happened that day and how the marble jar works, Brown asked her daughter, "Do you have any marble jar friends? Friends who put marbles into your jar? Friends you can trust?" And yes, she did. So Brown asked, how do your friends become marble jar friends? What do they do to put marbles in the jar? She was surprised to hear it was mostly small things, which were actually big things, like saving a seat at the lunch table, or remembering her grandparents' names, or asking how a sick relative is doing. Brown realized that trust is like a marble jar. For every moment of trust earned, one marble goes in the jar. She says, imagine that every person you meet has an invisible marble jar. Whenever we connect with someone, we have the opportunity to add marbles or take them away. So on a bulletin board in the hallway of our religious education wing in this building, Reverend Kimberly posted a large drawing of a jar, and the kids wrote on paper marbles some behaviors that build trust. Examples of how we fill the marble jar: use kind words, be a good listener, share, give compliments, help a friend, ask if someone is okay, apologize, stand up to a bully. Examples of how we empty the marble jar: make mean jokes, exclude others, gossip, share someone's private story, ignore someone's feelings, use hurtful words, bully someone, or ignore bullying. When we do marble jar filling behaviors, it makes people feel happy and builds on the friendship. But when we do emptying behaviors, it makes them sad and hurts the friendship. I mean, that's really all you need to know, but if we want to be adult about it, I can tell you about Brené Brown's BRAVING acronym, which she uses to describe the anatomy of trust. When she analyzed her research, she discovered 7 elements of trust and arranged them into the acronym of BRAVING: boundaries, reliability, accountability, vault, I'll tell you about that later, integrity, non-judgment, and generosity. BRAVING serves as this helpful checklist when we're working with trust. Trust is like that marble jar built up over time. It takes practice and experience, and it helps us believe that someone's worthy of our trust when we have built up their marble jar and they have built up ours. It helps us know when we are worthy of their trust. Brown says when we trust, we are braving connections with others. B is for boundaries. Make clear what's okay and what's not okay and why. R is for reliability. Do what you say you're going to do repeatedly. A is for accountability. When you make a mistake, you own it, apologize, and make amends. Vault. This is not the pole vault. This is like the bank vault. This is like zip your lips, turn the lock, and throw away the key. What I share with you, you hold in confidence, and what you share with me, I hold in confidence. I is for integrity. Match your words with your actions. Choose courage over comfort. Choose what's right over what's easy. Practice your values. N is for non-judgment, meaning that we can fall apart, we can ask for help, and not be judged by each other. G is for generosity. Assume the most generous things about others, and when things go wrong, check in with them. So braving can be used as a tool for reflection and action. We can think about trust in its different aspects and intentionally work on each aspect to build trust. And when we lose trust, we can reflect again on these 7 aspects and figure out what went wrong. So instead of just saying, I'm hurt, I don't trust you anymore, we can figure out why. For example, maybe I set a boundary with you, telling you to please not call me before 8 a.m., and you called me every day this week before 8 a.m. Or I relied on you for emotional support, and you didn't show up for my mother's funeral. Or you forgot to pick up my kid after school, and you never apologized. Or I told you something in strict confidence, I made that clear, and then you broke the vault, and it came back to me through my neighbor's mouth. I'm trying to assume the most generous thing, but I need to know what happened, etc. We can reflect on what happened, we can name it, and we can choose to talk about it, to build back trust if that is an option. And Brown says it works with self-trust too. When you lose trust in yourself, go through the list. Did I honor my own boundaries in that situation? Did I keep my promise to myself? Did I make a mistake, and can I forgive myself? Did I overshare my own confidential info? Did I act with integrity? Was I pathologically self-reliant? Did I judge myself when I needed help? Etc. Did I assume the worst thing about someone and act out of fear? Because braving means braving self-love. Brown says if your own marble jar is not full, if you can't count on yourself, then you can't give others what you don't have. Buddhist teacher Sharon Salzberg says, to offer our hearts in faith or in trust means recognizing that our hearts are worth something, that we ourselves in our deepest and truest nature are of value. I believe that relationships with people, communities, institutions are built at the speed of trust, which is sometimes slow and unpredictable, and that's okay. Trust grows through taking reasonable risks. Over the last few months, I've been stretching myself. I've been taking a few reasonable risks to build trust in more relationships. I've been talking to my neighbors more, striking up conversations at the gym with people I don't know. And you guys, you know I'm an introvert. I've even been calling my political representatives to voice my opinions. Now, when I feel nervous doing this, I ask myself, why am I nervous? Oh, yeah, it's because I'm taking a risk and I'm making myself a little bit more vulnerable. Charles Feldman defines trust as choosing to make something important to you vulnerable to the actions of someone else. Building trust happens with people we know and people we don't yet know. Building trust with people we don't know really took a hit during the pandemic lockdown 5 years ago. I mean, who was carrying the COVID-19 virus and who wasn't? We could never tell. Who could we trust to wear a mask, especially around our immunocompromised loved ones? Then after the November 2024 election, it seems so long ago, doesn't it? Especially since a day is no longer a day. Well, post-election, our trust in people that we don't know took another hit on both sides of the aisle. Several of you shared with me that you felt a significant drop in your trust in the goodness of humanity, that you felt a higher sense of suspicion as you went about your days. And I felt it too. Is that person next to me at the bus stop someone who hates my trans kid or hates me? Is my coworker someone who would call ICE on my neighbor or on me? These questions were in our minds. Lesson 12 from Timothy Snyder's book on tyranny, 20 Lessons from the 20th Century, instructs us to resist tyranny by making eye contact and small talk with people. Seriously, this simple practice can help resist tyranny. He writes, this is not just polite. It is part of being a responsible member of society. It is also a way to stay in touch with your surroundings, break down social barriers, and understand whom you should and should not trust. If we enter a culture of denunciation You will want to know the psychological landscape of your life. He continues, tyrannical regimes arose at different times and places in Europe of the 20th century, but memoirs of their victims all share a single tender moment. Whether the recollection is of fascist Italy in the 1920s, of Nazi Germany of the 1930s, of the Soviet Union during the Great Terror of 37-38, or of the purges in communist Eastern Europe in the 40s and 50s. People who were living in fear of repression remembered how their neighbors treated them. A smile, a handshake, or a word of greeting took on great significance. When friends, colleagues, and acquaintances looked away or crossed the street to avoid contact, fear grew. I was curious about a culture of denunciation, so I looked up the word. The dictionary says that denunciation means the public condemnation of someone or the act of informing against someone. Do you think we are there yet? Can eye contact and small talk with strangers help to save us from denunciation? Mahmoud Khalil was illegally arrested and detained by ICE on March 8th. Mahmoud is living in the United States legally, a permanent resident with a green card. There is no legal reason for his arrest and detention. He was targeted as an example for the rest of us. Before I say more, I would like to lift up that here at First Church, we have a free pulpit and free pews. You are free to express your opinions and beliefs, and I am free to express mine, and we don't have to agree. We live within covenanted community here, not a creedal faith. We don't promise right belief. We promise to treat each other well, to risk vulnerability, to build trust in each other. Part of living in covenanted community is being aware of the multiplicity of identities that we carry to learn how we are personally affected by what's happening in the world, to know each other's hearts. I know that suffering is alive for you in so many ways. I know that you feel the heart-rending grief of seeing dead Israeli hostages coming back out of Gaza. Infants, children, mothers. I know you feel the heart-breaking weight of more than 13,000 Palestinian children killed in the war. I know you want Israelis to be safe. I know you want Palestinians to be free. I know you want Jewish and Muslim people to be safe and at peace wherever they live. And the world is complicated. Our identities matter as we feel this grief, as we form opinions on what we think should happen. Although ICE could target anyone, it matters that they illegally arrested and detained a Palestinian activist, someone who protested the war in Gaza. ICE chose Mahmoud because they think they can disappear him. They think they can get away with it. Hay una mujer desaparecida. Hay una mujer desaparecida. En Chile, en Chile, en Chile. But this is not Chile under the dictator Pinochet. Not yet. This is the United States. and the detention of Mahmoud is a test of democracy. In a democracy, the right to due process applies to citizens and permanent residents, legal permanent residents, whether we agree with their views or not. Mahmoud was arrested not because of his immigration status, but because he expressed his political opinions publicly at a university and because his views go against the current administration's foreign policy. Mahmoud was threatened with deportation because he protested. In a democracy, we have the right to protest a lot of different things. We need to pay attention to the context of this arrest and detention. The news has reported that the Department of Homeland Security is using intelligence information to identify students who protest at universities. And the department is putting pressure on universities to suppress free speech and to release names. We need to pay attention to the complexity of protesters as well. Hundreds of Jewish activists took over the lobby of Trump Tower last week, demanding the immediate release of Mahmoud. Who is our neighbor? Are we our brother's keeper? Who do we trust to catch us when we fall? These ancient religious questions are alive in our suffering while more and more tests of democracy unfold. How will we build deeper mutuality with each other in these times, with both known and unknown peoples? For the past may be with us in a decision to trust, but the future is too.